Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is October 21st, 2025, season 12, episode 3. I'm here with Quentin Stroud and Arthur Mudakis, and today's topic is going to be about intelligence and emotional intelligence. And we were just joking about the podcast topic, and I said I don't know anything about emotional intelligence.
Uh-huh.
And
And I,
Quentin
and
said,
I said, I said, and that right there could be a whole podcast.
"Yeah, right,
Because
right,
how many people go around and they don't operate or don't know anything about, at least, with emotional intelligence? Like, that's important.
right, right." And that in and of itself, in the grander scheme of things, is intelligence.
Right.
So, and I said I could say I don't know any effing thing about emotional intelligence. Damn it, which makes it even go further. So let's start off with intelligence
Yes.
and its relationship with independent Scientology and Dianetics and the varying degrees of. Now, it's important to note that this came up because when you receive auditing, it's always good to get a personality test and get an IQ test. And you would be surprised how many people conveniently forget about doing the IQ test because they don't want to do it. They don't want to be judged, and that's not what it's for. It's to have a baseline when you're taking a pre-clear or a pre-OT in session, so that you have this is what their IQ was, this is what their personality test said, and that was at the beginning of the auditing. And then at the end of that particular grade, you do another personality test and an IQ test, and you can see the improvement or change. In some cases, there can be a change other than an improvement, but that is part and parcel. And this is a very interesting point, is that you can see a change in a personality test, and it looks like it's bad, but really what's happening is you're seeing a shift in valence, in purposes
Yes.
or evil purposes or whatever. And this takes time. And this can cause a reduction as these aberrations come into view, a reduction in your intelligence, your IQ, which is an arbitrary number, obviously. And we need to say that up front. It's just a number, but it is a comparable number from before and after, and so on. So let's move on to just intelligence in general.
Well,
And Quentin, I think, has quite a bit that he wants to add to this topic.
I'll tell you this, and we can probably get into it a little bit more later. But you're absolutely right about how intelligence shifts. And I think that this is really important because when when you're looking at your IQ, you're looking at uh, a set of data based on looking at patterns, based on answering certain questions in a certain time frame, and how that whole thing is calculated, right? And then you don't really calculate, and I'm using it in air quotes, you don't really calculate EQ. EQ is more qualitative. Emotional intelligence is more qualitative. Now, I had a client who was in college and university and went through an extremely traumatic um, SA, a grape experience. And when that person was graped, that person took on a valence and became a genius in mathematics after a after this kind of experience, after this kind of traumatic experience, became a genius in mathematics, changed majors, went through a whole thing in mathematics, and became an accountant, had a whole life. Came to me some years later dealing with a lot of stuff around their situation, and this came up in session. Now, catch this. After we moved through it, their abilities shifted.
Hmm.
Okay. And so when I say shifting intelligences and shifting valences and all this stuff, it's a real phenomena. It's a real thing. And so when we take a look at you at one point and you go through some auditing, you get some help, you get some stuff going which for you, and then you show up at another point and you have different abilities turn on. You have recovering some native abilities of who you are as a being. Like that stuff can really, really shift the way you experience life. So I just wanted to also just kind of piggyback on what you said earlier that that is a real phenomena.
Yeah, it is, and that's one of the interesting things is LRH talks about the personality test and the your A, B, and C columns, the far left first three columns. In a lot of cases, you'll see a person who thinks everything's beautiful and life is bliss and things are fine and everything, and he says that is a falsity. And when you get them in session and you get them to realize that they have a ruin and what the ruin is, and then you do another personality test, you'll see it come down below zero, whereas before originally it might have been quite high and anywhere between the 50s to the 90s, and it'll drop down because they're shifting through this I'm supposed to be to who they really are and then back to who they are. And it is a misnomer
Right.
for a person to say, um, I'm my valence. There's no such thing. This is what he says.
I'm in my feelings.
I'm in my valence. No, you're only in somebody else's valence. If you
Hmm.
are being yourself, you are yourself. You're not
You're
in a valence. I hope that
right.
makes sense. Now, the reason why I mentioned this is about what you were talking about, how somebody can switch on and have more abilities because that is a valence. That's a now I'm supposed to. That's a solution
Hmm.
to a problem.
Hmm.
Okay. And this can affect intelligence greatly, either in a positive or a negative way, which we'll get into a
That's
little
right.
bit later. So, both on the personality test and the IQ test, these two things are very much correlated as to what a person's IQ. And when you do a personality test, we mark the IQ on that test as well, because you can see that drop occur where they'll be really smart because that's whoever they're being as a valence. And then they'll drop down and their IQ will drop because now they're being themselves. And now we have to restore their beingness, doingness, havingness up to a point, and then the IQ will recover above what their IQ was in the other valence. Interestingly enough, given enough auditing hours and enough subject
Right.
material and grades and such stuff like that. I'm not talking about just one grade, but one of the most important aspects of IQ and EQ is if you clean up, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, if you clean up a a person's overts and withholds, as well as their ARC breaks, and getting their rudiments in, the ARC breaks, the present time problems, withholds, miswithholds, and then you get those overts off. Now they can see, they can solve problems better, IQ, because they are not withholding themselves from an area, or more so areas, which allows their ability to perceive things in IQ, because typically IQ, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is
Mhm.
generally patterns.
That's right. That's
Okay,
correct.
so you wouldn't be able to see certain patterns before because you're distracted with your attention on all of this withhold, 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 which is an out of valence thing. Because when a person is in ethics, they are themselves. When a
That's
person
right.
is out of valence, to a greater or lesser degree, they are out ethics because their attention is on withholding from. So you can see how this could affect both intelligence quotient and emotional quotient or level at the same time, primarily because if they're out of valence, their emotional IQ is going to be lower because they're being somebody else as opposed to them being themselves, which is a very
Right.
interesting thing.
Well, and I want to say this that when we're talking about intelligence, so let's package it all in a big pretty bow. The LRH says in Scientology '08, the Book of Basics, he says that the human mind is engaged upon perceiving and retaining data, composing or computing conclusions, and posing and resolving problems related to organisms along all four dynamics. And the purpose of perception, retention, concluding, and resolving problems is to direct its own organism and symbiotes and other organisms and symbiotes along the four dynamics towards survival. So that's what a sane and rational mind would do. I want to do everything in my purview. I want to make sure it moves towards survival. Intelligence then is the ability to perceive, pose, and resolve problems. The dynamic is the tenacity to life, the vigor and persistence in survival. Both dynamic and intelligence are necessary to persist and accomplish, and neither is a constant quantity from individual to individual, group to group. The dynamic the dynamics are inhibited by engrams, which lie across them and disperse life force. Intelligence is inhibited by engrams, which feed false or improperly graded data into the analyzer, LRH. So when we're talking about intelligence, we're really talking about how you solve problems. We're really talking about how you get through life. We really talk about how you move things along. We're really talking about how do you pull it all together and get it all right so you can survive well. And so when you run into problems, and I'm saying run into because per LRH, it says the mind poses and resolves problems. So your mind is posing its own problems, by the way. But okay, so you run into a problem that just happens to come from nowhere. And how do you use your intelligence to resolve it? It says the organism, and symbiotes, which means all its supporting elements. How do you use you and all your supporting elements to resolve your problems? This is what we're trying to get to here. And of all the world's religions, of all the world's spiritual sciences and philosophies, this is from to me, in my experience, one of the few that really talk about intelligence as a life hack. Everything else is like, just believe. I thank God I believe. But Scientology, independent Scientology, really gets you to realize, like, wait a minute, intelligence is like a big deal for you being happy and surviving.
Yeah, well, and LRH talks about the concept of a held down five, as in it like on a calculator. If you're holding down the five key, you're going to add more to something and you're going to get a wrong answer, which directly correlates to a lack of IQ and EQ because you're making a decision, and this is the important part, you're creating your own problems that you think are a solution to a problem because of a held down five. You're coming up with a wrong answer. And this comes down to the axiom of a Thetan has to have a game. That's part of it. But the thing is the creation of those problems are problems you don't want because of the held down five. You're making a decision that becomes a solution to a problem that becomes a further problem itself, which reduces your ability to solve the problem IQ. So to the degree that you get these things out of the way, your postulation machine, you, is postulating problems that become further problems, as opposed to removing those things in the reactive mind that make you decide to create more problems that are false solutions or false purposes based off of prior confusions that were not resolved. This is what the false purpose rundown uh, auditing action is about. So this directly influences your IQ. And if you get these things resolved, false purpose rundown isn't something that the average Joe at the bottom of the bridge should do. They could try, but depending on their IQ, they may or may not be able to resolve the prior confusion. So the more auditing you get, the better false purpose rundown works, because it's basically an extension of overts and withholds, or confessionals and or prep checking, which is handling all the different considerations around a problem. You guys still there?
Oh, I'm sorry. My phone got muted. Sorry.
Okay.
It says that stupidity, axiom number 38, stupidity is the unknownness of
Of
consideration,
consideration, right?
right? And so what ends up happening is when we're talking about intelligence, intelligence and judgment are measured by the ability to evaluate relative importances. So what Jonathan just said is so important. When problems show up, are you is are you on a held down five, inserting things into it that have nothing to do with the situation? Oh, but what about this? Oh, but what about that? Oh, but what if they're gonna say what they're gonna say about me? Oh, what how does my hair look? Oh, like we just trying to get to the restaurant. What does that have to do with anything?
Right.
Like the problem is I'm hungry. The problem is not who's gonna look at your hair and talk about you. But if there's this thing, this held down five, right? And it says intelligence and judgment are measured by the ability to evaluate relative importances. So to you, your hair being out of place might be a relative importance. To my
Right.
stomach, it is not, right? And so it's like these things are something that one has to really consider when I'm trying to make life decisions, when I'm trying to go up the bridge, when I'm trying to figure like how to get all these things, myself and all my symbiotes moving closer towards survival. That's a really, really important way of like viewing it. Like, how am I going to get through this if I don't find the right importance, if I don't put the right importance on the right thing in the right place? You understand?
Yeah, and exactly. That's the thing, is you have these, the held down five per definition is an altered importance, and that is directly affected by what is causing you to have a lower IQ is those things. It's not something else. So if we get those out of the way, all of a sudden you're solving your problems better. Your troubleshooting skills, if you will, to where now you can start posing more pro survival solutions. And it's said, in at least in our IQ test and several others, and I even ran this up against ChatGPT the other day. The average intelligence quotient for an American is 100. That's the average baseline intelligence. 110 is above average. 120 is you're doing pretty well. And genius is 150 or above.
Hmm.
So, to the degree that your awareness level has been increased or is um, reduced, as the corollary to that, is to the degree that you can solve and create problems for solving, because it doesn't matter what you do. It's just whether are you in control of the games that you play or are you not. Is the game playing you or are you playing the game? Generally,
Right.
early on, the game is playing you, which counters your IQ, which lowers your IQ, as well as to get into emotional. intelligence. Your emotional intelligence is going to be lower because you're running into so many stops, which creates more problems, more angst, more frustration. You're short with your coworkers, your relatives, your significant other, and all of that because you're overwhelmed by the things of your own creation and your inability to spot what those things are.
Yeah. And what happens is that once this randomity, that's the what word LRH uses here. It says randomity is the misalignment through the internal or external efforts by other forms of life or the material universe of efforts of an organism and is imposed on the physical universe by counter efforts in the environment. So when you have randomity, so it could be somebody else's stuff, it says other organisms, or it could be the physical universe. Oh, my tire blew out, right? Or whatever, right? So you have this randomity seeming coming up from a random, like, oh, where did that come from, right? Kind of thing. But randomity, it moves in cycles. So I want you to get this. LRH Axiom 71. The cycle of randomity is from static through optimum, through randomity sufficiently repetitious or similar to constitute another static. So you're going to go through this cycle of problems, randomity, 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 plus or minus randomity, too much crazy, too much stuff, and it goes through these cycles. 1 minute you're calm and you're static, you're at peace, I'm good, and then it moves through optimum, and then through sufficient randomity, repetitious. It's going, oh, and that's where problems, I'm using that word, that's where problems start to feel like they're persistent. They keep coming up and they keep, this led to this, led to this, led to that. Boom, bada, boom, bada, boom, bada, boom, bada. Ain't that something? But with good intelligence, with high intelligence, are you able to align? It says intelligence depends on the ability to select aligned or misaligned data from an area of randomity. And so your intelligence says, wait a minute, this is what's important, that's not. And so when you're looking at an IQ test, for example, it'll give you, this is to this as that is to that. And then it give you A, B, C, D, E. It's asking you to select from that data, aligned or misaligned data, select from that importance so that you can then select the most right answer. And I'm saying most right because whatever. So the most right answer. When you're dealing with problems in your life, you want your intelligence, and we're just talking about IQ right now. We're going to go into EQ when it deals with some other factors. But when you want your intelligence to help you select the aligned data that deals with your problem so you can handle that and it no longer be a thing. It goes back to static. It goes back to baseline. It goes back to a tranquil place, right? And that's why intelligence is so important in independent Scientology. It's because we want you to be able to function at optimum randomity so that you can learn, you can grow, you can have the right uh, survival conditions in order to live better. This is what intelligence can do for you.
Right now, and to give as an example, when I came on um before we started the podcast and everything, Arthur, you and Arthur were talking about the plus randomity that he was dealing. Arthur, do you want to give an example of this plus randomity, this
I think I
randomity?
think I think he dropped out.
Oh,
He had a call or something came in.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So in talking to Arthur, you were going over uh, the randomity that he was running into since he'd gotten back into Australia. Order versus disorder, and randomity, just to define to our listeners, is the randomness and the degree of things that are occurring in a person's or being's life. So you can have plus or minus randomity per the axioms, minus or plus randomity if there's too much of it, attenuates your ability to perceive to the point to where it'll put you to sleep. If nothing's going on and you're bored, what happens? You fall asleep.
Minus randomity, right?
Minus randomity. If there's too much randomity going on, you get a person who goes into shock, and
Yeah.
their ability of perception is attenuated to the point to where they may pass out or will pass out.
Mhm.
So, to that degree, randomity is unpredictedness on a smaller scale, but on a larger scale, randomity is createdness put there by the being experiencing this. And hear this, yes, Virginia, you are the one creating that plus randomity that cannot be controlled. And that is the lower of the IQs that you have, because you are not in control of the randomity of which you create.
Yes.
Nothing else is putting it there. And that is that randomness is controlling you, as I was mentioning earlier, as opposed to you creating randomness of your own optimum quality. And that can go higher and higher and higher, and you can deal with more things because
Mhm.
your IQ is now higher, your awareness is now higher, and you are there to be able to pose your own problems for their solution and play the games that you want to play. But if it's your IQ is lower, now you're swimming against the current. You're going upstream, and you've
It's
got
harder.
more, right, you've got more pushback that you can't resolve because of a lower IQ. A higher IQ can problem solve, figure out puzzles, so to speak, in the physical universe, and then from that, take that success, that win, and go, hey, I was able to handle that. Now I can take on this, which is part of even your three barriers to study, too steep of a gradient. That's really what it is that you're dealing with in
Right.
IQ, is it's too steep of a gradient.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you said something that really is very important before we shift into talking about emotional intelligence, because we're talking about the ability to perceive, pose, and resolve problems, intelligence, the ability to perceive, pose, and resolve problems. And you just said it. Yes, Virginia, you are doing this to yourself, right? And so Axiom 77 says that theta affects the organism, other organisms, and the physical universe. I want you to get this. Theta affects the organism, so yourself, other organisms, and the physical universe by translating theta facsimiles into physical efforts or randomity of efforts. And so he goes on to say, definition: the degree of randomity is measured by the randomness of effort vectors within the organism, amongst the organism, talk about around you, amongst races or species of organisms, or between organisms and the physical universe. So if theta affects your life by throwing these facsimiles into physical efforts or randomity of efforts, you are, as a thetan, as a being, posing your own problems, because it says the ability to perceive, pose, and resolve problems. You're posing your own problems to resolve them, and then you give yourself a little pat on the back. Oh, I got through that catastrophe. Oh, I was able to avoid getting evicted. Oh, I was able to avoid da 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 da. And you come up with all these randomities, right? And you're doing it in order to perceive and pose your own problems, you see, and resolve them. And this is really important because as you continue to go up the bridge and you start to feel and know that your IQ is improving, your intelligence is improving, you start to select problems or pose problems for greater survival in a more sane fashion. Not to say you never have problems again. Oh, I'm OT. I ain't got no problems. Nah, boo. That ain't what that means. It means that I'm posing. I'm posing problems now in a more sane direction towards a higher level of survival. And so after I beat this level, I'm gonna go to the next level, and I'm gonna go super saiyan, and I'm gonna go, and you keep going on up and up and up, because now I'm able to perceive, pose, and resolve problems on a higher level.
Right. And so, to give an example, and this is a real life, real world, simple analogy. If you've ever had somebody throw something at you when you didn't expect it, and as you try to catch it, it's bouncing off of your hands in front of you and going up in the air, and you're trying to get a hold of it, and you and you either drop it on the floor or you manage to handle that randomity. Okay, that let's look at that as the ability to handle that randomity. Solve the puzzle of how I catch the object that was thrown at me suddenly. And you bumble, 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 and it falls on the floor, or you figure out how to grab it with that randomity being so high, you didn't expect it. Now, if you take this analogy and you look at it as one of two things, LRH was very, very big on drilling. Drill, 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 drill until you can do it flawlessly, flawlessly, whether it's in auditor training or administrative training or particle drills like I'm describing to you. The first thing we used to do when we would go on course at Flag in 1988 is we would do a particle drill, and we would have a ball, and it would be 110 120 students in this first floor of this big bank building. It used to be the main office area where you would go in and deposit your money, and all that stuff was removed, and now it was just desks, so there was room for everybody to stand between the desks. So you have this big circle, and we would throw the ball back and forth, and you never knew who was going to throw it to you and where it was going to come from or when it was going to come from. So as we continued, the supervisor would say, okay, speed it up, speed it up, speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. And so you had to pay attention. And we would drill this until everybody was in present time and would not drop, literally, per the expression, drop the ball. Don't drop the ball. That was the goal.
Wow.
Okay. So if you look at this, let's carry this forward into the extension of auditing. And let's just say that uh, the auditing question is uh, this happened. What would you do? And that's the auditing question. Of course, I'm not auditing anybody when I'm saying this, but I'm giving you a
Right.
manufactured statement. Okay. Uh, this happened. What would you do? I would do this. Okay. What would you not do? I wouldn't do that. Okay, good. This happened. What would you do? I would do this. This happened. Oh, I wouldn't do that. So, what you're
Mhm.
trying to do with that type of process, which is almost every repetitive process on a particular subject, is you're trying to get the person flat on the wrongnesses and the rightnesses of what they did. And in so doing, you get the person to look at it from a standard time level of randomity. It's not sped up like with the ball example. It's just when you answer, you give it to the auditor acknowledges you, and you go from one side of the dichotomy to the other. What would you do? What would you not do? This is how you improve a person's intelligence, by flattening out all of these things that they either didn't learn or they did learn, and they compare and contrast to a point where they go, hold my beer, I got this. That's how auditing works. That's how your intelligence quotient, your IQ, improves, because you're looking at it and you're changing your mind about the randomities you inspected and that you didn't inspect it, until you come to the realization, I can do this. That's auditing, simply put.
That's amazing. Yeah,
So,
that's powerful.
yeah, so you can see how it works.
Because once it's yeah, because once you're able to perceive properly, and you know your solution, whatever I would do this, I wouldn't do that, or whatever. You know your solution. What's the problem?
Right.
what, once you know your solution, what's the problem? I say all the time, I communicate to resolution, to re-solution, which means if this problem ever comes up again, it's already been resolved.
Right.
It's already been solved. We ain't got to talk about this no more. What you say? What did we discuss 3 weeks ago? What did we do? What did we agree upon 5 years ago? How are we doing this? It's already been resolved. Why are we going back through this? What's the problem? Right? And so if you get this flat and then through auditing, you get so clear in your resolve, you get so clear in how you handle life, that life, again, problems and they're gonna do what they do, but you know how to handle problems in such a way that it has less of a charge with it. It don't crush you. You know what I'm saying? You handle it. You handle it. I don't know what to say about it.
Right. And that is, if you know, based off of auditing, you've gone, well, yeah, I made some really crappy decisions there, and I came to the realization that I was the one that caused that problem in the first place, and I needed, it was something interesting, and it kept me going, because when I'm bored, I just create even more problems. So yeah, okay, so I don't do that anymore. So it's a little bit that every auditing process is a, what did I learn from all of this? What did I not inspect? What did I tell myself I didn't know, but I knew it already? How many of you that have had auditing that are listening to this podcast have been in session and gone, oh, yeah, I knew that, but well, you know, it was more interesting for me to not know it, because a Thetan has to have a game. If you knew
Yeah.
it, it wouldn't be a game. But it was a game that you decided to play and not know, and so reduces your IQ to solve
Yep.
problems. Who's reducing your IQ? Only you. But
Right.
this is how
Not the
you
book. It's
improve
not
it.
the boogeyman.
Right. It's not the boogeyman. It's the Thetan themselves. It's theta. So
Yeah.
if you carry this over to EQ, emotional intelligence, LRH says that emotion is used to get a desired result. So what's the corollary of that, Quentin?
So emotions. First of all, let's look at what LRH says emotions is. So he says that emotion is three things: engrammic response to situations. So it's the engrams responding. Ah, whatever. Right.
Right.
Endocrine metering of the body to meet situations on an analytical level. Sometimes emotions are analytical, right? Sometimes emotions are sane, the right emotion in the right time. If my dad passed away, my emotion in that moment was sane to feel grief in my dad passing. It was endocrine metering to meet the situation in the analytical level. And then third is the inhibition or furtherance of life force. So if emotions are used to produce an effect, give that again. What's the statement?
Well, the point is that emotion is used to get a desired result, and if you were to
Desired
take this
result.
out of Scientology nomenclature and concepts, you would be looking at, to a degree, within a certain band of the tone scale, fight or flight.
Hmm.
Make
Yeah,
sense? And
that's
so
right.
the endocrine solution is increased heart rate, increased adrenaline, increased tension in the muscles, because danger is near, or or whatever it is, depending on the situation. But you're looking at, on Earth, they look at everything as fear or no fear, and that's a very narrow band, because you're looking at it from the viewpoint of Homo sapiens viewpoint, which is someone who is not clear, whereas somebody who is clear is now Homo novus, or better.
Hmm.
They no longer have their
Yes.
own reactive mind, because fight or flight is, it's obvious, is the reactive mind. The stove is hot, I can't go in the kitchen. That's fight or flight
Right.
right there. That's the reactive mind. So you're using emotion vis-a-vis the reactive mind. The reactive mind says, trigger warning ahead. And then, okay, I can't go in the kitchen. I burnt my hand on the stove. It's a dangerous place. I just can't go in there. Where you handle that engram, those secondaries, those locks associated with that in a long chain, all of the sudden the person walks in the kitchen, cooks on the stove, and doesn't even realize they did any of that because it's no longer there. It's been dissipated, it's been erased. And so when
Yeah.
their IQ was lower, I can't go in the kitchen. Now they're solving the problem with I need to make a meal and I want it tasty. And while that meal was delicious, hey, you know what? I went into the kitchen and I didn't even think about that stove burning. That is EQ.
And then they write a success story
And
for
then
the
they
from
write a
auditing.
success story, right? Because if you knew what was wrong with you, it wouldn't be wrong with you. That's the auditor's job, is to get you
Yes.
to, okay, so this happened, what would you do? This happened, what would you not do?
Yes.
That's the Scientology way to dissipate an engram, going at it
Yeah.
from a gradient from locks to secondaries and engrams. Because what the person is doing is they're lock scanning, they're secondary scanning, and they're scanning engrams, but from a Scientology perspective of a repetitive process. Now, it's important to note, and this is the thing that most people leave uninspected. Did you know that when you do the Dianetic sequence of questions as an auditor or receive them as a PC, it was and still is the first original repetitive process?
It is.
Because that's what that is. Find an incident that you can comfortably face. Okay, when was it? Okay, good. Return to the
Mhm.
beginning of that incident. Good. Move through that incident. Okay, good. Tell me what happened. That's
Mhm.
a repetitive process until it's flat. That charge has been dissipated off of it. And that is, if you look at it from a Scientology perspective, what what would you do? What would you not do? What would you do? What would you not do? Over and over and over. But you're asking them what happened. It's the mirror image that you're doing. This is what holds down a person's IQ is stuck attention here, stuck attention there. And like
Yeah.
Elliot says, you're buttered all over the place. But as you get them to look at, and we're going to do a podcast on this, the shoulda, woulda, coulda next, you're taking that out because
Right.
now you can be decisive because no longer do you have to use emotion to get a desired result because you've run the emotion off, which increases your IQ, increases your EQ because you're no longer responding in an emotional fashion
Or
to get a
misemotion.
desired
Right.
result. Right.
Right.
Isn't that something?
And if we think about emotional intelligence, again, what is intelligence? It's the ability to for individuals to solve problems to survive, and to perceive, pose, and resolve problems. That's what intelligence is, the ability to perceive, pose, and resolve problems. Now, we're talking about emotional intelligence, and we just said that emotion is used to get a desired result. So as you're going through life, you as a being are pulling up the emotional or the emotion, the E or the energy behind motion. You're pulling up the necessary energy. It could be excitement, it could be joy, elation, it could be whatever, it could be cheerfulness, it could be, I'm going to pull up the desired energy to get the job done, to get the result that I want. And when it's sane, and when it's logical, and when it makes sense, and it's not misemotion, what ends up happening is you're able to choose the right emotional response to the right situation. That is not insane. Just because I get angry doesn't make me insane. I'm angry because I can pinpoint why I'm angry. It's not just some, oh my gosh, I just feel this, what they say to the kids nowadays say it, I'm just feeling some type of way. I'm just feeling some kind of way. Just feeling some kind
Right.
of way. You know,
Right.
what does that mean?
Right.
But so emotional intelligence is knowing how you feel, knowing how others, and being able to perceive how others feel, being able to perceive these emotions, and then being able to use those emotions to further survival, being able to understand emotions of others. This is emotional intelligence. So the same usage of intelligence, but now it's applied to emotional information And so you now have the ability to detect and decipher emotion from others. How valuable is that? How valuable is that in relationship? How valuable is that in a business deal? Oh, he's not really in the deal. Yeah, let me, and then you use emotion, excitement. Hey, let's get this. We're excited about this. We're gonna, seal the deal, whatever. You use emotion. Pep rallies in high school, you just go to pep rallies and homecoming games and the whole thing because they
Hmm.
want you to use that emotion to get the desired result. And so when you're looking at emotional intelligence, you're looking at this thing from a way of how able am I, it's just an ability, how able am I to perceive, use, and understand and manage or regulate emotions for myself and others, for myself and others. This is so good. And as you are more able to do that, it betters your life. It furthers your survival. It really does.
Right. Now, the counter, the corollary to that, and this is important for people to understand, is that LRH discovered when he was formulating what is now modern metered Dianetics, new era Dianetics, that at the bottom of every n-gram chain, at the bottom of that, your basic on that chain, your original n-gram, at that time, a person makes a postulate. And you have to ask the pre-clear, did you make a postulate at the time of that incident? And that is what releases the n-gram chain because the postulate that was decided has the inherent component in its decision, wait for it, of both intelligence and emotional intelligence as a response. That postulate is a solution to a problem. I'll never go near dogs again because I
That's
got
right.
bit. And
Right.
so, right there, you're putting your boots in your own cement. Whatever it is, you're the one that is making that decision. And then that monitors you're going down this dwindling spiral. I can't respond in this way. I can't,
Oh
I
my
can't,
God.
I can't respond in this way because you've decided that your emotional response is to get the desired result, which is dogs, I can't be around dogs. And you run out of the room. That's an
Listen,
emotional response to get a desired result. That desired result has the only apparency, an apparency that is only of your own consideration. That is why you
mhm,
made the postulate. That's why your EQ is what it is until these things are unburdened. And then all of a sudden, your quote unquote response slash reaction is not the same. And this is why, in your case, Quentin, and Arthur's, you guys were doing TR0 and TR0 bull bait to flatten the so called emotional response to something that was said, to flatten that out, not only for learning how to do it in session as an auditor, but in life
yeah,
without
yeah.
going in session. That's why audit TRs,
TRs.
professional or otherwise, are an auditing action because just like we were talking about, okay, this happened, what do you do? Okay, what would you not do? That's what you're learning when you do communication routine drills is you're getting the person in a real-time environment to do that particular thing, disregarding all emotional response because at the end of the day, engrams have that postulate. I must respond this way when this is said
Yep.
because what is laughter? I mean, you guys laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed on TR0 bull bait. Everybody does, and it's a gas. It's a lot of fun. But the
Right.
thing is, that is to get a desired result because the person is rejecting something you say because there's a truth behind it.
Hmm.
So the social veneer, which we talked about the other day, is to laugh at it as a rejection instead of confront it.
Right.
See how all this stuff
You
ties
let
in?
me tell you, let me tell you, you just freed me. That what you said, I want to go with you what you said about posture, and you cement yourself, your boots in your own cement. My son's mother used to always say, money is evil, and the government use money to control the masses and to control people. Money is evil. And then she'll call me and ask me for money. And I'm like, you never have money because you think money is evil, but you keep calling me asking me for money. That don't make sense.
Right. That's a held down five. That is
Yes,
a negative IQ response.
that doesn't make sense. Why would you have this consideration that money is evil and the government just use money to control people and I want she would say I want nothing to do with money. She would say this. And then ask me for money to pay the light bill.
Now
What?
that
What's
now
happening?
that's right. Now that if that's not a held down five, I don't know what is.
Right. It's terrible. And so all I'm saying is, and I know that we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but when we're talking about intelligence, whether it be IQ or EQ, when we're talking about the ability to resolve problems from a logical, thinky kind of way, or being able to resolve the problems of life when it comes to your emotional experiences, either way, your awareness of self and others, the awareness of your environment, the awareness of the situation at hand, all of this stuff is so important. And this is why moving up the bridge and the awareness scale that goes right through the middle of the bridge is so important because you realize that you become more and more and more cause, you become more and more source, you become more and more who you really are. And when you realize this, your intelligence, your ability to perceive, your ability to be aware, both in a logical sense and from an emotional context, these things become super important to further your survival. And that's what we're here for. That's what this whole thing is about. Wanting you to
Mhm.
survive better and wanting you to survive at a higher, from a higher scale, based on where you want to be and based on who you are. And so this is why auditing works. This is what it does for you. And so by getting into some remote auditing, being able to sit right there in the comfort of your home, and you go, do birds fly? You go through the drill, you go through the auditing commands, and you're coming up with your own solutions. This is what intelligence is. You're coming up with your own solutions to your own life problems as they show up in session. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I know that we have a lot of listeners that listen to these podcasts sometimes more than once. And as, I've never had anybody say this, but it's always the same thing, and this is on the micro, is that we always come back to get in session, get on course, learn this information. And when I was a kid, I used to watch Scooby Doo, and my intelligence rose as I got older, and I would go back and watch it a year or two later, and I had this cognition that it was always the person that wasn't part of the mystery machine who were going to solve these mysteries was always the person that wasn't part of that group, Shaggy, Daphne, Vilma, Shaggy, and Scooby. It was always the person that they met in the beginning of the episode, and they go, Mr. Smithers,
Right.
every episode. Okay, and the reason why I'm saying this is because when we say that you should get in session, you should get on course, you should avail yourself of this information and get a conceptual understanding it from a training aspect and from a personal aspect. Because the thing is you have to pose your own solutions. Just like with any good story, any movie you've ever seen, any book you've ever read, your suspension of disbelief has to be entertained and put in place because you go, well, that's so wild. That could never happen. If you do that, your disbelief is not suspended. Therefore, you
Yeah.
don't have a story. Okay,
You know,
but this is what people are doing to themselves. Is they're not suspending their disbelief by looking at it and going, this is the solution. It is the solution. 200 podcasts in. Trust us. You're the one not telling yourself the outcome of the game that you created yourself with that postulate. It's that simple. You met the bad guy in the beginning of the episode of Scooby
yes,
Doo, and that's all there is to it. You've just
yeah,
told yourself, well, it couldn't be Mr. Smithers, but it always is because that's the start, change, stop, beginning, middle, and end of that story that you were there and communicating with nobody else. That's
yeah.
what monitors your IQ and your EQ.
And then they say, I would never do this to myself. I would never consciously and
Right.
it's below your conscious level of awareness. And I think that that's what's so important. You're doing these things, or we, and I'm saying you, we do these things to ourselves, and it's below our conscious level of awareness. Our choices, our go this direction versus go that direction, choosing your partners, choosing a job situation, making these decisions on the job, da 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 da. Like we do these things sometimes below our conscious level of awareness, and then we wonder why it's problematic. Where is this coming from? Why does this keep
Right.
happening to me?
Right. You're your own Mr. Smithers. There was always two outcomes. It either went one way. They admitted it and they as ised it and they looked at it and went, I wanted to keep you meddling kids out of my factory. Okay. Or it was deny, 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 which is not is, not is, not is. And
Right.
so you are your own Mr. Smithers, and you are the suspension of your own disbelief in your own novel, in your own movie. And you're going, I would never do that, because if you didn't suspend your disbelief that you were capable of that, you wouldn't have that game. But the thing is, you can play whatever game you want ultimately, and you don't have to get into things that harm your other dynamics or your first dynamic. You just do this to yourself and go, I would never do that, said Mr. Smithers when they pull his mask off. But that's the thing, that mask is the valence you are
Wow.
dramatizing as a solution to a problem in life because you saw when you were either younger or recently that was how to survive instead of do it honestly with your own personal integrity, keeping your code of honor in. This is why your IQ is low. And when you spot this in all of these different areas, then you have a solution to your low IQ and your low emotional quotient.
And your habits.
And your habits change, your standards change. As you say, Quentin, the better my
Yes,
standards, the better my life. But the
that's right.
thing is you have to pose solutions to the problem of life by learning the mechanics through training and auditing. Help us help you.
That's it.
So we hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and it's really covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and you might want to listen to this over once or twice over the course of a couple of days, and do a little drill there. Throw the ball around. Well, if this happened, what would I do? Well, if this didn't happen, what would I do? And look at this. This is how auditing works. You can go back through self-analysis lists, and you can do that with all in ARC, high affinity recall processes yourself, and undo these locks so that you improve your IQ just with a book. Do it the way it says to do it, and you'll get out of it what you're supposed to get. And when you're like, oh my God, I could never recall that. Well, guess what? That means you need to recall that, because if you don't want to, you're not confronting what's going on there. Pull up your big boy pants and your big girl pants. Do those processes in self analysis and take the first step. That which is complex is confront. What about it's complex? I don't want to confront it. There's your answer. Confront it.
That's it.
Yep. So
Wow.
for Quentin and myself, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And we'll see you in a day or two for episode 4. Namaste, and we love you. Bye-bye.
Peace.